Good evening. I'm Kelly Wright. Thanks for joining us as we spend this next hour together. And I do sincerely hope, wherever you are, that you're safe and well, taking care of yourself and your family. My opening observation tonight, clarity. Certainly, I have focused on this issue before in this program, and it seems we must focus on it yet again. My case in point, what a difference a day makes, or for that matter, what a difference a week makes when it comes to understanding the messaging coming from President Donald Trump on coronavirus. You see, last week you'll recall that the president stated that we would see the coronavirus get worse before getting better. At that point, it seems he was pivoting or turning towards the full support of his medical team on his coronavirus task force. But now, it seems that he has distanced himself once again from Dr. Deborah Birx, Surgeon General Jerome Adams, and in particular, Dr. Anthony Fauci, because the president is stating publicly once more that he supports the use of hydroxychloroquine, even citing a Houston-based medical doctor who touts it as being the cure for COVID-19. That while the FDA disapproves of this kind of treatment, and public health experts cannot agree on its treatment, or for that matter, they too dismiss it as being a cure for COVID-19. Now, in full disclosure, we have had a patient who had COVID-19 on this show 2 months ago, who was treated for COVID-19 with hydroxychloroquine. I'm happy to say that he's alive and well, but there's still a dispute and discrepancy over the efficacy of using this kind of treatment to deal with COVID cases. Now, having stated that, we must abundantly state that coronavirus remains a clear and present danger to this nation. And this is not a time for the president to be scoring political points when lives are at stake. We need a message of clarity from the president and the White House, and for that matter, for the entire federal government as it deals with this COVID-19 pandemic. And those are my opening observations. Without a clear national plan, we could see more people die. The death toll already stands at 150,000, and it is still rising. Also, the president, in the midst of these unprecedented times, appears to be more concerned about his popularity in comparison to his top scientists. Listen to this.
And he's got this high approval rating, so why don't I have a high approval rating with respect, and the administration, with respect to the virus? So it sort of is curious. A man works for us, with us very closely, Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx, also highly thought of. And yet they're highly thought of, but nobody likes me. It can only be my personality, that's all.
On Tuesday, presumptive Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden, on the heels of paying his last respects to civil rights leader and Congressman John Lewis, discussed his economic plan. Also, he talked about President Trump and racism. Biden claimed that President Trump is horrifyingly, and not surprisingly, intentionally stoking the flames of division and racism in this country. Mr. Biden, with his Build Back Better campaign, discussed his economic plan for America as well, and he specifically addressed helping Black Americans, proposing $30 billion or 10% of federal investment that he plans to place into a small business opportunity fund designed to help minority-owned businesses.
We need to make bold, practical investments to recover from the economic mess we're in and to rebuild the economic future our country deserves. I've explained how these investments will be paid for. I've laid it out. Today, I'm here to explain how the Build Back Better plan will deal with systemic racism and advance racial equity in our economy.
Before we go to break, here is video now of an honor guard carrying the body of Congressman John Lewis from the rotunda in the U.S. Capitol. Lewis's body is bound for Atlanta, where he will be funeralized at the Ebenezer Church, where Martin Luther King Jr. once spoke and pastored. One thing to remember about John Lewis is how he impacted the lives of everyone. Here is a message from a young man that I spoke to yesterday about his feelings and his thoughts on John Lewis.
one of the things that, we talk about in our fraternity, our motto is culture for service and service for humanity. And, Brother Lewis was the epitome of a Sigma man. I mean, he's my idol as a man of Phi Beta Sigma. And I just want to continue to, and hope to, be able to continue the legacy that he started.
And based on that, what's your message to America?
Just like what he said, I can continue what he said. Get in good trouble. If there's any time to get in good trouble, now is the time to get in good trouble.
Joining me now on the program is Dr. Avis Jones DeWeaver, and she's a political analyst. And certainly, it's always good to have you on, Avis. And we're going through a lot right now when it comes to politics. Where do we begin? Let's begin with the President of the United States.
An endless source of discussion and dialogue.
Well, let's start there because there's a lot going on. There's the public support of hydroxychloroquine. There's the messaging that's coming out of the White House, which has not been clear because of him going against his scientists. Let's begin there. What say you about all of this?
It's exhausting. It is really, I find it, I feel like I'm living a future Netflix documentary in real time. I mean, that's what this feels like right now. This is crazy. This is like off the rails crazy. And the sad thing is, it would be one thing if there were no potentially fatal consequences, but we all know that there are. 150,000 people have already succumbed to coronavirus. And he, for a minute, looked like he was reading talking points and staying a little close to those talking points during his briefings. And, you even had people once again saying, oh, he's changed. And, you had to know there was only going to be a matter of time until he reverted back to his sort of ridiculous notions, and beyond ridiculous, just dangerous notion of putting out misinformation that can cost and has cost countless lives. And so it's really disappointing that he seems to be so irresponsible, so uncaring, so unprofessional, and just so just unwilling to accept truth, that he will continue to bow to these and espouse these sort of conspiracy theories as a way to give people false hope, as a way to sort of use it as some sort of political battering ram that he thinks he can use for his advantage in the upcoming election, rather than prioritizing the health and safety of the American people. He never fails to disappoint and never fails to put himself and his perceived advantages over the well-being of the people that he was sworn to protect and serve.
It is very surprising to hear what he has stated about Dr. Anthony Fauci, texting about him once more. And just yesterday, I had an interview with the Surgeon General, Jerome Adams, who expressed deep concerns about what this virus is doing, how it's ravaging the African American communities, the brown communities, and the Native American communities. And he's quite concerned about this. And yet we have the president talking about popularity contests, where he's saying, Dr. Fauci's more popular than he is. Dr. Deborah Birx is more popular than he is. Why isn't he as popular as they are? And this is not a time for playing games, or like you said earlier, there's some serious issues here at hand, particularly with 150,000 deaths from this coronavirus. Having said all of that, what moves this president seems to be his concern about re-election. Yet what's at stake, as Joe Biden talks about, and I want to bring him in now, is the fact that the former vice president, presumptive Democratic presidential nominee, is stating to America that this president has actually failed in leadership on this pandemic. And in addition to that, Biden has also asserted that the president has fueled the flames and stoked the flames of racism in this country. What do you say about that assertion from the former vice president?
Well, he's spot on, and it's obvious. It's obvious to the American people. If you look at the polls, we are seeing that by far, coronavirus has become the number one issue among voters. And we also see that over three-quarters of the nation, in essence, believe that he's failing miserably in terms of his leadership in this moment. This is why, if things continue on this path, he will lose Florida. You know, and as we know, which is often buttressed by what in his last election was one of his best constituencies, and that was the senior population. Seniors aren't stupid. They see that he is literally, his irresponsibility is putting them especially in a very vulnerable position as it relates to this virus. And the fact that he can only sort of process things around how it impacts him once again shows his, I would say, psychopathic nature, in which he seems to be incapable of feeling empathy for anyone else. That's why in this moment of great peril, in which we're seeing, multiple states across this nation now experiencing sort of red alert status as it relates to this virus, at a point when, if it would have been handled correctly, things would be actually on the downtrend. The fact that we're at this crisis moment, and his main concern is that other people who are more popular than he is, and the specific reaction out of that White House is to undercut and try to dismantle Americans' trust in the most trusted epidemiologist that we have in this nation, that's been sort of leading this effort around attacking this disease. It is unconscionable. It shows you once again that his priority is not the American people. His priority is himself, not only when it comes to the election, obviously, but also when it comes to this very, as I would say, very petty indicator around who he considers to be most popular. This is not high school. You're not trying to win the most popular award. You're supposed to be trying to save human life. And clearly that has not even reached any level of priority in terms of his thinking.
I'm talking to Dr. Avis Jones, the Weaver political analyst here on the Kelly Wright Show. When we return, I'd like to talk to you, Doc, about one other aspect of Joe Biden, and that his Build Back Better campaign is rolling out an economic plan that he says will deal with systemic racism and help African Americans, Browns, and Native Americans. We'll talk about that when we return. Welcome back. I'm talking to Dr. Avis Jones DeWeaver. She's a political analyst, very astute in her analysis of what's going on here in Washington. And, we were talking about President Trump in the first segment. Let's talk about Joe Biden now, and the fact that he rolled out yesterday his economic plan for helping minority-owned entrepreneurs and businesses. And he's providing, or at least stating to the Federal Reserve to provide money, $30 billion, that would be targeted and earmarked for helping to reshape and rebuild and buttress with a solid foundation the African American community, the Brown and Native American communities. Is he on the right track with this, or does it look a little bit like the opportunity zone that the Trump administration rolled out?
I would say it's, he's on the right track with it. I believe he is looking to have it be a little bit more like Clyburn's plan around really looking at those census tracts that have shown high levels of poverty over an extended period of time, which is, in essence, let's just use sort of policy wonky speech here. It's a race neutral methodology in order to provide hopefully a race specific effect. So we would know that those specific areas are typically Black, Brown, Native communities, and infusing extra cash into those. But I would also say the opportunity zone option, it would be a viable option if there are specific requirements in there that would make sure that that those sort of money that would be invested in those areas would actually trickle down to the communities. For example, making sure that people in the communities are hired for jobs that are produced there, that, people in the community get the opportunity to in some way have some sort of stake in those. I think Here's my point. No matter who wins, we as a people need to make sure that we push and press that administration to make sure that we receive benefits, and not just individuals who are able to sort of come into our communities and take wealth from our communities and take that wealth back to their communities. So, I do think that Biden is on the right track, but we would still need to hold his feet to the fire, even if he wins in November. And God forbid, if Trump were to win re-election, I would be hurt. But I would say that doesn't mean that you pick up your ball and walk away. It means that you still push for change that you believe will help us. And I think that if that's around an issue like the opportunity zones or like this Build Back Better sort of initiative, we need to make sure that we are in the room and pushing to get the as many positive outcomes as we can for our communities.
Yeah, and as you know, the current Opportunity Zone plan, which is under Trump's administration, a lot of that by and large is determined by the local municipalities, the leaders of that particular city, or the governors of those states. So to your point, Black Americans, Brown Americans, Native Americans, they do have to push that those hard-pressed areas in those hard-pressed communities need to be recognized by the leaders and really push hard to say, you must recognize our need for succeeding and exceeding all of our hopes and dreams by making sure that we're deemed an opportunity zone. Having said that, you were talking about money trickling down to our communities. What about the fact that on Capitol Hill, the Senate is still mired in Republicans trying to come out with a stimulus plan that's contrary to what the Democrats wanting more money. And getting back to the President of the United States, he stated that the Democrats want a lesser plan. And I kind of scratched my head and I thought, does he not know what's really going on Capitol Hill, that the Democrats really want more money for the American people throughout this COVID-19 crisis?
Right.
While the Republicans are trying to go backward and cut the money in half.
Yeah, I mean, he knows. He's a liar. I mean, that's. I think at this point, there was a period of time when the Washington Post was calculating his lies, and I think whatever calculator they've used probably has blown up by now. I mean, the last statistic that I heard was he was at about 16,000 lies, and that was even like towards the beginning of this coronavirus crisis, which we know he's lied a ton throughout this. And this is just another example of his lies. I mean, we just cannot keep up with it. He's a habitual liar. That is a bold-faced lie. We can do math, $200 a week versus $600 a week. We know which one is more. We know which one is less. So once again, he's lying. And he's quite frankly creating a clip that his entire propaganda machine can use to misinform his particular constituency to get them all riled up to support him in November. It is a complete and utter lie. There's no other way to contextualize it.
I want to get back to Joe Biden once more. Joe Biden says that we have to end systemic racism. And of course, his financial plan was in part to address that. What else do we need to hear from the Biden camp in terms of actually dealing with systemic racism? Is he doing enough, or are his gaffes going to continue to confuse Black Americans?
Yeah, I mean, we all know that Joe has been known for decades to be a bit of a gaffe machine, and that's unfortunate. So that's a reality, and that's just part of what we need to accept, that we will probably not hear the last of those between now and November, and even after November. I'm glad that he is focusing on economics as a clear way to start to address this issue, and I do think that needs to be a priority, but it's clearly not the only one. I would love to see the Biden campaign come out and say that the law that was introduced in the House around criminal justice issues and police brutality, he would sign into law on his first day in office, for example, something like that. I would love for him to make a commitment about what his first day in office would mean for Black people specifically, what he would do. And that could be things around a lot of things that he could do could really be related to executive orders that he could push through really quickly that would, in essence, counter the executive orders that Trump put in place, which took us backwards, right? Which really, it seems like Trump's initial initiative, and still to this day, is really has been trying to undo everything that got done in the Obama administration. Yeah. And we know that a lot of things had to get done via executive order in the Obama administration because once they lost control of Congress 2 years into his 8-year presidency, it was very hard for him to get legislation through to create change. So I would love to see from him some commitments around what he would do, his first week in office, his first day in office, for example, that would address these systemic issues. And that, I think, would give something tangible for people to hold on to so that hopefully they're not completely distracted by the gaffes that I can guarantee you we haven't seen the last of them leading up to November.
Yeah, and even if he gets elected, we would still hear more gaffes from
yes.
Joe. And of course, next week he'll be announcing his running mate. It appears likely that, well, we just don't know yet. It could be an African-American woman. We will see. Before I let you go, I heard the bell. I know we got to go. Before I let you go, I would be remiss if I did not ask your recollections and your remembrance of Congressman John Lewis, the conscience of Congress.
Yeah. Now, this man, first of all, to me, he is just, if it wasn't for Congressman Lewis and his whole cohort of change makers, not only would we not have the opportunities that we have today in terms of African Americans, America would not be a more perfect union in terms of a nation that lives up in any way, shape, or form close to its founding, flowery language, right? It took African Americans and specifically people like John Lewis to make America more congruent with what it always has claimed to be. And so he is a true American hero in addition to being a specific warrior for the rights of African Americans. And it just really made me feel good to see the level of honor that he has been given, not only in terms of news coverage around it, but specifically in terms of the ceremonial aspects of how his life has been honored and continues to be honored, as well it should be. I think it's beautiful that we have really shown him to be this icon that has changed the trajectory of this nation in a much better way. And it's beautiful to see that, and he deserves every last honor that he is getting. And it's beautiful to see that he will, generations from now, he'll be part of the history of what is, as poets would say, has brought us closer to making America what America was meant to be, and making it that for you and me.
Absolutely, absolutely. That city on a shining hill that keeps shining the light in darkness, and certainly he did that. And Avis, thank you for being on the program. Always appreciate you. May you and I and others who care about the legacy of John Lewis continue to stay woke and start some good trouble.
Absolutely.
Right. We're back with more after this. Welcome back to the program. So we've been talking a lot about what's going on from the political spectrum in terms of the president, also his challenger, presumptive Democratic presidential nominee, Joe Biden. And now I want to bring in attorney Mark Harris, civil rights attorney of the Ben Crump law firm based in Sacramento, California. And certainly it's always a good time to have Mark on this program. Mark, it's good to see you today.
Thank you, Kelly. It's always good to see you.
I want to start with the one thing that I have not talked about today, and that's Attorney General William Barr and his hearing, which was very heated before the House Judiciary Committee. I think it's important to note that he appeared to be at times very frustrated at times to be very defiant. And you have worked with the Clinton administration. Have you ever seen an attorney general so combative as we saw in yesterday's hearing?
The short answer is no, but it also talks about the role of the attorney general. I think that your viewers are aware historically of the role of the attorney general and other members of the cabinet. But if you don't mind, I'd just like to review a couple of facts before we do our deep dive. Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution lays out the president's cabinet, one of whom is the attorney general. The only person in the cabinet of the president who's not referred to as secretary is the attorney general. The attorney general is appointed by the president, as we know, confirmed by the United States Senate, and is in a position where that person, like all of us who serve a president, myself included back in the past, as you mentioned, I served President Clinton, all of us are sworn to an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution, the laws of the United States, but it's expected that we're also swearing a silent oath of allegiance to the President of the United States. We've had exceptions to that. Elliot Richardson during the Great Saturday Night Massacre during Watergate is an example where he was given an order by then President Nixon he didn't believe he could follow. But generally, if the Attorney General is acting within the letter of the law and the ethical standards of our profession, their fealty, if you will, their loyalty is to the President of the United States. And that's where Barr is in terms of what he's been doing with this president, in my opinion.
And so let's be clear, there are still federal troops in Portland, albeit that they are now discussing that some sort of deal has been reached between the governor and the federal government, being the President of the United States and William Barr, the Attorney General, to withdraw those troops. What else has to happen to assure the American people that federal troops will not be used to go in to disperse peaceful crowds? They are allowed to protect federal buildings, as we know. What has to happen to regain the trust between the Attorney General, members of Congress, as well as the American people?
I'm not sure that can happen. We're in a very tough situation. The way you set that question up, Kelly, is the issue of the moment. Trust in our government, faith and confidence in our government. I think the government collectively, whether it be the Democratic-led House, the Republican-led Senate, the Supreme Court, or the presidency and the administration and the executive branch, I think they're all leaking right now when it comes to the trust and confidence of the American people. Who do we believe? Who should we have confidence in? Functionally, the Attorney General serves at the pleasure of the President of the United States. That's clear. That's been since the beginning of the very country. If you feel that what you're doing is illegal or immoral, your option as the Attorney General is to resign your position, as it was for every one of us who served the President of the United States. I was never put in that position by former President Clinton. But my option is to express my concern, my displeasure, give my analysis, understand that the shot caller, if you will, the ultimate buck stops with the President of the United States. And I think everything that Attorney General Barr is doing is consistent with that. The question is his advice colored by the fact that he wants to please the president? In other words, does he believe that what happened in Lafayette Park, the clearing of those peaceful protesters, was appropriate within the Constitution? If he ethically is conflicted or legally conflicted, he owes it to himself, the president, the people of the United States to offer his resignation.
And you know that upon testimony before the Judiciary Committee, Attorney General William Barr stated that no tear gas was used there at Lafayette Park. And isn't it funny or ironic that a National Guard officer stated, yes, in fact, tear gas was used.
You know what, though, Kelly? It's some of this stuff is getting to be silly semantics.
It really is.
So it's not officially tear gas, but it's pepper spray. It's not an official chokehold, but it's a carotid hold. It's not a hands around the throat, it's a knee to the neck. I mean, that's what's so ridiculous about this whole thing. We were witnessing in real time. I remember you were covering this live. Yeah. We were witnessing in real time something that looked a heck of a lot to me like tear gas. However you define the actual chemical elements and components of tear gas, what they were using in Lafayette Park looked like tear gas to me and probably most of America. To your point about Portland. When we first talked about this a week ago, there was a discussion between you and I and your viewers about whether they were military personnel used, Army, Navy, Marine Corps, and Air Force. Turns out this administration, doing its gymnastics, didn't use official members of the military, which would have been a violation, I believe, of the law and of the United States Constitution. They used generically defined troops, U.S. Marshals, Border Patrol, ICE agents. This is getting to be really ridiculous, Kel.
Yeah. And as you know, we the people are quite divided right now, more than ever, and certainly we need to be more united. When we return, Mark, I want to talk to you about police reform and a situation that's developed in Los Angeles that you're quite concerned about, and you can enlighten us about how we the people need to focus on how we the people are being impacted by police reform or the lack thereof, not only in Los Angeles, but across the country. Back with more of civil rights attorney Mark Harris after this. Welcome back to the program. So I'm joined by civil rights attorney Mark Harris, who is part of the Ben Crump law firm. And you're based there in Sacramento, which is the capital of California. And Mark, you were talking to me yesterday, or at least keeping me up to date about what's happening in Los Angeles as it relates to police reform going on there. What is happening? What news can you bring to us about why the police department and the district attorney are under fire or under scrutiny right now?
It's a tough problem. You know, I was born and raised in Los Angeles. I still consider in some ways Los Angeles my hometown. I've lived in Sacramento much of my adult life, but my heart remains in Los Angeles, the place of my birth. Jackie Lacey, who was elected to district attorney in 2012, first African-American and first woman in the history of Los Angeles to hold that position. She came into office with a whole lot of support from particularly the African-American community in LA. Black folks were celebrating over the fact that for the first time they thought, an advocate in that position. Since that time, she's been reelected once and she stands for reelection this year. It's a nonpartisan position, meaning it's not held by Democrat or Republican. But Jackie Lacey has been roundly criticized by a number of the members of the greater Los Angeles community for never bringing any charges or prosecutions against any law enforcement officials, no matter how heinous an act or acts they perform. And the latest scandal involves 3 officers who, it turns out, falsified evidence. 3 officers in LAPD falsified evidence regarding arrestees who were forced to sign a confession that turned out to be untrue. A confession saying they were members of gangs and had participated in gang activity, which led to their prosecution and conviction. And it turns out this was inaccurate. This is a horrific mark on the reputation of the district attorney. And many people believe that she may very well be voted out of office because of this scandal.
Well, we do know that Black Lives Matter has specifically pointed out that she should be removed from office. What do you say about that organization targeting or setting its sights on getting her removed?
You know, it's been a contentious relationship between the district attorney, Jackie Lacey, and Black Lives Matter in Los Angeles. Black Lives Matter led a demonstration to the district attorney's home. It was nationally celebrated, I should say, captured on national television. What happened? The district attorney's husband came to the front door with a weapon, aimed the weapon at Black Lives Matter protesters, threatened to shoot them if they didn't leave the front of their home. The district attorney apologized for her husband and excused away his behavior, which I thought was ridiculous. We were home alone. We were frightened. Those protesters have a right to peacefully protest, and they have a right to peacefully protest relative to the public property adjacent to the private property. Once they violate the private property, they can be cited like anyone else. They had no weapons. They were not hurling any threatening language towards the district attorney or her husband. It was completely inappropriate, the reaction of the district attorney's husband, and then her efforts to try to excuse that away, in my mind, was, if not equally, was probably more inexcusable. She's an elected official, supposedly the chief law enforcement officer in the second largest city in the United States. So it's been a very fractured relationship between she and Black Lives Matter.
Mark, your memories of Congressman John Lewis.
Oh, what an amazing human being on one heck of a journey. I don't think anybody got as much out of life as Congressman Lewis did. I had the honor and privilege of having met him and spent time with him on more than one occasion. Just a warrior. When you look historically, particularly at John Lewis and what he put on the line as an individual, as a human being, over the course of his young life, you just can't help but have respect for him. I came to grow in my respect for John Lewis, that quiet, calming leadership, not the boisterous, aggressive leadership that, quite honestly, I tend to be more attracted to. He was a quiet warrior. He was a thoughtful person. He reminds me a lot of you, Kelly. He was able to put his words together very effectively. He didn't have to scream and holler and knock things over. But when you talk about a fractured skull, and when you look again at that bridge in Selma, Alabama, that I won't refer to by the name that it was christened, when you look at that famous Selma, Alabama bridge and what he put on the line and what he went through physically and emotionally, I don't know how anybody couldn't have a tremendous amount of respect and affection for the conscience of the Congress, John Lewis.
Absolutely. Well said, Mark. And there's no way that any of us can fill his shoes, but we can move on. And as I stated to a guest earlier, Dr. Avis Jones DeWeaver, may you and I and all of us who really had an affection and love for John Lewis and all of the values and faith that he espoused, may we always go out and stir up good trouble.
That's right.
All right.
That's right, Kelly.
Mark, I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to join you and your viewers, Kelly. Thank you.
All right. God bless you. We'll be back with more.
God bless you.
Welcome back to the program. So it's time now for strengthening the family. And certainly in these unprecedented times, we do need information on how we strengthen the family. These are also uncertain times. So here to talk about how families deal with this uncertainty that we're mired with is George and Tondra Gregory, founders of Journey for Life. And they are marriage enrichment coaches as well as relationship coaches. I just find them to be great coaches. In fact, they're chaplains to the NFL team, the Los Angeles Chargers. And who knows if we're going to have an NFL football season this year because everything's uncertain. So what a great way to talk about this and get into this topic of how do we deal with uncertainty in our home when we're dealing with it on the outside as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Kelly, thanks again for having us here. We love every segment that we do with you. And from what Tondra and I have done over 25 years of marriage, we've always helped couples navigate seasons of uncertainty, whether it was when we moved from North Carolina to New York City, or whether it was from moving to New York to LA to work with NFL players and coaches and their spouses. What we've learned is a few things. One is seasons change. That's it. Seasons change. And just because our country is going through times of uncertainty with COVID-19 and policy changes and things of that nature, what we realize as couples, we go through seasons of change as well. And so Gary Chapman, who's an expert on marriage as well, he wrote a book called The 4 Seasons of Marriage. And when it comes to couples and families with kids, we have to realize that with every season, it changes just like the 4 seasons in relationships. Things change with different parts or different seasons as they come and they go as well.
Yes, and I'd just like to add that when we go through seasons, we are changed through those seasons. And so what worked in one season of your marriage or knowing your partner in one season does not guarantee that things will be the same in the next season. So we've got to know that we have to grow together and evolve together and change together through all these different ups and downs. And how you do that is staying connected and being in touch with where each other is changing and growing in these seasons.
Good point. And I like all of the above that you've mentioned because there can be cracks in the foundation of not only a marriage, but also in everything we go through, in your job, in your home, in your life. And we're certainly seeing that because of this coronavirus. And we do know that this disease adversely impacts people of color, and people of color are already going through disparities. So that just compounds the fractures, if you will, in the foundation of a marriage, in the foundation of a family. So really coming on today and talking about strengthening the family and how do we address it from a perspective of, the uncertainty, these uncertain times. The one thing that seems very clear in what you stated about the certainty of dealing with uncertainty is to keep maintaining faith in each other and to be able to communicate together. And like you said, George, earlier, be flexible.
That's right.
Really good advice from both of you. So let's continue this dialogue on Friday, if you will, about these uncertain times, because it seems like one thing that is certain, this uncertainty is going to be around for a while.
Indeed.
I got to make a joke somewhere.
That's right.
Got to laugh to stop from crying sometimes, really. But thank you both. I look forward to talking to you more about this, of how we deal with uncertainty within our home life and our family life, because we really do need to make the family stronger. And it's important that we be prepared for these uncertain times. And I think sometimes when I look back on this, when this COVID-19 hit, guys, I think we were all caught flat-footed.
Yeah.
But thank goodness we've got your advice around to remind us that we've got God, we've got each other, and we've got to get through this together. George and Tanda Gregory, look for them on Friday as well. Strengthening the family. God bless you both.
God bless.
God bless.
Thanks.
We're back with more after this. Welcome back. I want to thank all of the guests for appearing on tonight's program. And of course, I thank you for joining me as well. Final word tonight, wisdom. Certainly something we can all use. Wisdom produces knowledge and discretion, and it is needed to establish clarity on how we deal with these uncertain times of COVID-19. A good proverb states that good counsel and common sense are traits of wisdom. It provides insight. It helps lawmakers legislate fairly, helps governors govern more effectively with justice and peace. Hopefully, the leaders of this country and our states and our municipalities are paying attention to wisdom. And may we all be righted and ignited to not spread fear, but to spread knowledge and wisdom and love, freedom, and peace. Good night.
If you don't feel it now, just wait. It's coming on, the love train. Just give it time, give it time. Get on board. That means you and you and you on the love train. Get on board. All creeds and colors, brothers, all sisters and brothers, and sisters on the love train. Get on board the love train. Everyone's invited. We're all united on the love train. Get on board. All creeds and colors, my sisters and brothers.